Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the third album from Ariana Grande called Dangerous Woman. You know, it's been fascinating watching the evolution of Ariana Grande, and given that I've already covered two of her albums on this show, I've had a front row seat to pretty much all of it. Now, granted, evolution might not be the correct word for the carefully considered marketing and micromanagement of Ariana Grande's musical career, but there has been a progression of sorts, and I'm a little bit on the fence about how well it's ultimately worked. On the one hand, the instrumentation and production moving from Yours Truly to My Everything has only been a net positive, giving her breathy, soaring vocals the room that they have desperately needed. And while the songwriting has kind of been micromanaged, there have been real moments of maturity that have started to come through in the writing that has led to some very strong songs, including the fantastic Love Me Harder with The Weeknd, one of my favorite songs of 2014. But throughout the lead up to her newest record, Dangerous Woman, that progression has seemed shakier than ever. You can tell that her producers and handlers are pushing for a more explicitly sexy image and sound, and it's an open question whether or not Ariana or her writing team can pull that off believably. Part of this is her voice. When she sticks to more sultry, low-key R&B cooing, it's actually believable. But she doesn't have that element of rawness yet in her delivery to believably pull off pop diva powerhouse, and her occasional sloppy enunciation doesn't really help matters. But more than that, being sexy in music is incredibly difficult to pull off well. Sensual, a little bit easier because you can modulate your range, but sexy requires a type of intimacy and poise that Ariana Grande can't always pull off, which can make certain songs come across a little bit hard to buy into. And while this was an issue on My Everything, it looked to be a much bigger issue on Dangerous Woman, especially opposite artists like Lil Wayne and Future, who play in a very different type of brazen sexuality than Ariana Grande has ever touched before. Now that said, Dangerous Woman looked to have some promise, if only because Ariana Grande had taken a much firmer hand in the writing process, with nearly double the writing credits from My Everything. And with a smaller writing staff overall, I had some hopes that this might actually work, being more authentic Ariana Grande. So does she pull it off? Well, I'd say she gets part of the way there, but this is one of those albums that I had a really hard time evaluating, because while there's always been a certain lack of cohesion to Ariana Grande's albums, this record pushes it further than ever before in its attempts to provide more definition for Ariana Grande's sexualized persona, and really the question of how much you buy it will contribute to how much you like this album. For me, I don't know. Dangerous Woman, it's a good record, but the flaws are becoming a lot more noticeable and a lot less excusable as her career progresses, and really that keeps it from being a great album, at least for me. So how do we get there? Well, for a change in pace, let's start off with the lyrics and the themes. Although, let's be honest, in the latter case, you'd be stretching to find any cohesive theme to this album beyond Ariana's infatuation with a new paramour that inspires her to take chances, make mistakes, and get messy. And I use that Magic School Bus reference there because on some level, Ariana's brand of more explicit sexuality still isn't quite as believable as it should be. I'll talk more about her vocals later, but the writing still has a certain naivete about it that doesn't reflect a lot of experience. Hell, you can see it in the album art, where with her rubber mask, it's got bunny ears. And the sequencing of this album does not help matters either. You start off thinking there's an arc with this new mysterious bad boy that she falls for, how maybe it inspires some maturity or artistic growth, and yet that doesn't really happen, especially when the bad boy in question seems to mistreat her, or at least raise some healthy skepticism from other people, which she even acknowledges on Side to Side. You'd think that there'd end up being a shift coming off her excellent team up with Macy Gray, Leave Me Lonely, but then everything resets and the relationship is fine, and Ariana Grande is this insatiable sex kitten now. Okay, a little bit lacking in dramatic stakes or payoff, but I'll roll with it. It's a pop R&B album after all. Until you start digging into songs like the title track and realize it's not just the guys inspiring such sexual advances within Ariana Grande, but that she thinks that all girls have this inner bad girl within that they just can't wait to let out. Yeah, the lack of deeper maturity and experience does kind of show through here. But you know what? That can actually work too. If Ariana wants to explore her heightened sexuality while maintaining some vestige of control, that can actually work. That can come together. Doesn't really excuse the guy bossing her around on Moonlight, but as the record progresses to Greedy and Into You and I Don't Care, it clicks a little bit better as she establishes more control. But now we have to talk about the guest stars, and let's put aside Macy Gray and Nicki Minaj for a second. I've already said that Macy Gray offers a great older counterpoint to Ariana, and Nicki Minaj has always been the cooler older sister to Ariana whenever they team up. A lot of times it's turned out really well, even if reverse here can feel a little bit disconnected as it reasserts dominance over women in rap, but her male hip-hop counterparts? Well, one amusing trend is that whenever a male rapper teams up with Ariana Grande, she doesn't so much gain cred as they tend to lose it. And with Future, that actually kind of happens. His verse is mostly forgettable and everyday, and his contributions to this noisy, non-sex song, they're really kind of peripheral. But then Lil Wayne shows up on Let Me Love You, and as I said it before on Billboard Breakdown, this song just makes me feel kind of queasy. Forget the dour tone, the shrillness that creeps around the edges of the percussion, the stuttered chorus. What kind of creeps me out is Lil Wayne rapping in no uncertain terms about having sex with Ariana. And not only is it not sexy, it comes across like he's playing the Svengali after taking advantage of a girl right after her breakup. And this is where Ariana's vocals don't always help her as much as they should. She's slowly developing more of her dramatic range, adding a little bit more gravitas and sultriness in her lower tone, helped by this album not requiring she play the pop diva as often and stick more in that soulful R&B range. But look, she seems kind of over her head singing opposite Lil Wayne, the guy who made I Am Not a Human Being too. She still sounds younger alternatively, and that can make it feel a bit like a pose or that she's in way over her head. And opposite Lil Wayne, that's not a good thing. And you know what? The frustrating thing is that it's not always the case. And this is where I feel the production does a lot of heavy lifting for her. This is easily the most lush and full production that Ariana Grande has ever had. And it can give her plenty of support and a warm cushion of multi-tracking that can make her sound like a much larger presence on album. It finally seems like someone is clued into the softer, slightly blurry multi-tracking that characterized so much of Mariah Carey's work in the 90s. It's a natural fit for Ariana Grande. And right for the first song, Moonlight, we get a lot of that. Against delicate plucked guitar and a richer string section, it has that elegance to it. And that lush delicacy is a great fit for her. The soulful, smoky pianos of Leave Me Lonely with the muted menace of the bass line, the rich string section and brass of I Don't Care with the slight hints of G-funk in the guitar, even the desaturated bass-heavy darkness of Let Me Love You could have worked if the lyrics were framed properly and Lil Wayne wasn't there. And that depth in the production even carries over to some of the more pop-flavored songs. Into You, best example, with a deep thrumming synth and that huge bridge, but you can also see come through in subtler cases like the deeper drum timbre of the title track. And on that song, while I criticized it in the past for not having more of an edge in the guitars, thinking more on it, that wouldn't have made sense. There are already points in this album where Ariana Grande gets swamped out by her instrumentation, and even with multi-tracking, her voice wouldn't be raw enough to balance with the guitar all that well. That's probably one of the reasons that songs like the reggae touch side to side, or the buzzy overmix Every Day, or the choppy acoustic strumming on Someday don't quite click with me as well on an instrumental level. They don't give her voice the same room to breathe. The song textures are much too close to the front of the mix. Probably the closest she gets to making it work is Greedy, that with the horns and the funkier bass line is the closest she comes to pop. And even then, the biggest reason that song actually works is the key change that kind of comes out of nowhere. Kind of makes that song better than I would have ever expected, given I don't really love the lyrical sentiment. But in the end, this album was a lot harder to dissect than I expected. Mostly because more than any other Ariana Grande record, this feels transitional. She's still evolving as a singer, and while she's finally settling into production that works better for her voice, tonally and thematically, this album is kind of scattershot. And while that would be crippling for album artists seeking to make coherent statements, I'd argue that Ariana Grande has never really tried for that. She's a singles artist, delivering nuggets of overheated pop R&B still in that tentative phase of exploring sex. And while it's not believably mature, or even self-aware enough to tilt into that immaturity, there's a love-struck sincerity to many of these songs that is kind of charming when you break it down, and does seem to reflect Ariana Grande's genuine emotions, and that counts for a lot for me. So while I don't think this is her best album, there's an outright standout like she's released before, and Let Me Love You really is a miscalculation in terms of driving the atmosphere. It's a real dead weight in the middle of the album. I still like this record enough to give it an extremely light 7 out of 10. At the end of the day, I'm a sucker for some well-produced pop music, and she does deliver that. More than ever, I am kind of fascinated by where Ariana Grande is going to land next with her albums. I expect we're going to see a fair bit more of her in the future if this album doesn't flop, and given that it probably won't, yeah, I'm interested. I'm on board. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'm more than grateful. I got the poll up here, so what do you guys think about this album? Do you think it's an improvement? Do you think it's a stepping back? Or do you think it's kind of in the middle ground? Ultimately, I don't think it's her best, but it's got some moments. It's showing progression, and transitional albums are always kind of tough anyways. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.